everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Canadian Professional Sales Association and Engage Selling Solutions. Please note that you will be able to ask all questions at the end of the session using the Q&A function. We'll try our best to answer all questions within our allotted time. Today's webinar will focus on creating a non-stop sales boom and will be presented by Colleen, President of Engage Selling Solutions. A successful leader of over 20 years, she understands the challenges of selling in today's market. Colleen has become renowned for her practical strategies and use of measurement and accountability to inspire sales team results, and has been distinguished as a certified sales professional by the CPSA and an inductee into the Speaking Hall of Fame. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Colleen to start.
Thanks. And thanks, everyone, for joining me. I'm looking forward to working with you today. And we are going to move fast through some great content on how to create a non-stop sales boom. So let's start at the very beginning. What is a non-stop sales boom, or sales acceleration, as I like to call it? It's really a combination of understanding what your opportunity velocity is, and that's how fast things are moving through the pipeline, and of course your opportunity conversion. At what rate are you converting? You know, it's really funny because most people will say to me average conversion rates are about 25 to 35%, and that's very, very true. So when we're looking at opportunity conversion, we're not often looking to move things much past 35%. Let's try to get them to 40%, 45%, and that will create some sales acceleration. But I got to tell you, I'm coaching a small sales team up in Ottawa in the catering industry right now, and they called me and they said, we've got a closing problem. My guys really need to close more deals. And I did the calculation, and I kid you not, their win rate was 69 to about 78%, depending on the month. And I just about fell off my chair. I had to ask, like, are you doing something illegal, immoral, unethical? Are you bribing people? What's going on? And I come to learn, no, totally above board. They are exceptional closers. So my mind is starting to change on what acceptable closing rates are. That's my latest thinking just from this week. So the first step is to really understand where you are. And so if we look at this on a chart, if you've got low conversion, meaning your conversion rates are lower than 25%, and you have low velocity, meaning you don't have enough leads coming in the top end of the pipeline, with all due respect, you're kind of dead on arrival. You got no leads coming into the pipeline, and you're not converting them anyways. This is a business in deep trouble. But if you've got really high conversion and low velocity, which means you've got a ton of leads coming into the pipeline, you've got a super high conversion rate and low velocity, then you're constantly behind. And this is the case of my client currently. They just don't have enough leads coming in the pipeline to hit their goal, but they're closing a huge number of them. So we have to fix that problem. On the other hand, if you've got huge numbers of leads coming into the pipeline and a low conversion, you've got the floodgates open and leads are flowing through uncontrollably. I've got a client in California who is facing this right now. Their closing rate is 10%. So they have, their closing rate is high, but their velocity is high. So what happens is they've got 10% closing rate, low conversion, huge numbers of leads, and people just are going by the wayside. They're not getting the deals done. And so we really want to make sure we've got this balance of high velocity and high conversion. So we have what I call organizational acceleration, or non-stop sales boom, which is what I really want to focus on today. So we're going to work both on your conversion ratio and your velocity ratio by changing the way you look at your sales pipeline or the client engagement. So when I wrote Nonstop Sales Boom, one of the things I wanted to set out to do was to recreate in salespeople's minds how they look at the total engagement of their client. And I wanted everyone to think about this more holistically rather than in a linear fashion, because I find that if you think about in client engagement like a sales radar system, you're able to look for opportunities all around. It's a more holistic or 360-degree approach, because if you think about a radar system, it spots things, opportunities and threats in front of you, behind you, to the left, to the right, above and below. And that's what we need to do with sales, because far too often we don't accelerate because we're missing opportunities. So to really accelerate your sales, we need to rethink each stage. And the 4 stages we're going to be talking about here are attraction. So that's how do we get leads into the pipeline? How do we attract people to us? Participation, how do we get them to participate in our solutions? How do we grow them? 3rd stage is growth. And then how do we leverage them in order to grow our business more quickly as well? If we start in the attraction phase, what we really want to focus on here are 3 distinct things. 1, a concept that I call B to all. B to all means we're no longer in B2B or B2C companies, we are in B to all companies. That means that client attraction practices that are attracting consumers to a pair of jeans are the same types of practices that are informing business buyers, and vice versa. A buyer is a buyer is a buyer. And the more singularly we treat them in terms of client attraction, the more leads we'll attract. We also have to think about us as sellers marketing our brands and being ubiquitous in the marketplace. And we have to talk about the fact that it's both a quality and a quantity equation. You can't hit your goals if you have a high quality lead, but too few of them, right? That's the case of my catering company. They have great quality leads, but they only have a few of them, so they're not hitting their goals. It's both quality and quantity. So what this looks like is, first of all, everyone taking a step back and doing the math. I know everyone hates doing sales math, but this is so critical. We have to be, as sellers, intimate with our numbers on a regular basis. The math that I use is simply this. We take how many sales that you need in order to grow your business, multiply that by your closing rate, which on average in North America is 29%. If you've got a different closing rate, then that's fine. And this is closing from a qualified opportunity, so someone who's in the pipeline moving towards a proposal. And then we multiply that by the conversion rate of leads to opportunities. Now, I've seen everyone, anything from an 80 to 90% leads to opportunities closing ratio, all the way down to 10%, maybe even 5%, that are legitimate. If you're in a marketplace that's really competitive, you own huge amounts of market share, your lead to opportunity ratio could be very, very very, very small, because you don't have a lot of opportunities to create. On the other hand, if you're in a greenfield market where you've got huge amounts of endless opportunity, you could have a very high lead to opportunity conversion rate, and that's fine. So these are averages in North America. You need to do the calculations based on your own numbers if you have them. And then, of course, what we do is we come up with the numbers of how many leads, opportunities, and sales we need to hit your number. What's really critical for me is this number here, and that we break it down into the number of new accounts. And that's critical because we can't just create a pipeline with volume or dollars. This is a huge mistake salespeople make, is we say to ourselves, well, Colleen, I have $1 million target, I have $3 million in my pipeline, so I have enough. Well, you probably have a combination of big deals and small deals. And I don't know about you, but in my experience, it's easy to close the small ones and hard to close the big ones. And so chances are you're going to close 1/3 of the deals in the pipeline, but you're probably going to close the small ones. The big ones may not go away completely, but they close on their own time. They close differently from what we thought. They take a few extra months. So it's really critical that you actually break this down and you create your gap to growth based on the number of new accounts as well as that volume. Because then you're always guaranteed, if you work to these numbers, you're always guaranteed to actually hit your numbers. Okay. So once we have that, and in this case, we look and we say, okay, in this case, we need to make 1 sale, we need 3 opportunities, which needs 8 leads. And then what I look at is I multiply this by the number of attempts it takes to actually convert. So this, 3 times 12, is 36 attempts. So what that means to me is if I needed to close 1 sale, I need to make 36 attempts on an opportunity 12 times 3, 36 attempts for those 3 opportunities, which is going to generate 1 sale. Because you know, as I do, you don't pick up the phone with an opportunity and have them call you back right away. They sometimes take 2 or 3 calls. They sometimes take 2 or 3 meetings. And on average in North America, it's 12. So that would be 9 attempts a week. And then again, if it's 8 leads a month that I have to create, if I multiply that by 12, that's 96 attempts, which means I have to create 24, or I have to do 24 attempts in a week. And that's just in that 1 sale. So here's my offer to you. I actually have a calculator, Excel spreadsheet calculator. And if you want access to it that does all this math for you, so you don't have to do it yourself, you are welcome to have it. If you've got a copy of my book, Nonstop Sales Boom, there's a website in there that you can go and download it. If you don't have a copy, of course, you can always buy a copy, but you can also email me, and I'm happy to send you the spreadsheet. But I just want to show you how the top sellers really work these numbers, because then when it comes into coaching, they coach themselves, and of course their managers coach them to see, are you doing these 24 attempts a week? Are you doing these 9 attempts a week? Because if you're not, then you're not on the path to hitting your goal. And this is a huge mistake I see with companies who aren't accelerating their sales, is while they have targets, they don't create the pathway to the target. So the sales rep doesn't really know what is required on a day-by-day basis to do the work to get to the target. And that's a significant differentiator between companies who are accelerating and companies who aren't. So where are we going to find all these leads? Well, we talked about that be to all type strategy. Well, the first thing is we have to be ubiquitous. So what's fascinating to me is all the research that shows when sellers are ubiquitous, meaning they are everywhere in the marketplace using all the tools online and offline that are available to them, they are more successful. They're more successful in hitting their quota. They are more successful in their forecast accuracy. They have a higher customer renewal rate. Why? Because they're reaching out to their customers more often because they're using more media. And from a team's perspective, there's a higher likelihood that the team, the overall team, is going to hit their target. So when you think about this, there isn't a single metric that we measure that isn't improved by the sales team being ubiquitous. So what does being ubiquitous mean? Well, it means using every possible available media source to attract leads to you. That means networking, showing up at industry events, networking events. It means social media. It goes without saying that we don't use social media if your clients aren't on social media. But if your clients are on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever they happen to be. It could be on industry associations. It could be in newspapers. It's asking for referrals. It's writing and commenting on blogs. It's working through media and industry analysts. You know, there is no good and bad media if it's producing some results for you. The key is to measure it. If you're getting a result, then continue doing it. But the key to client attraction in this marketplace is to be heard above all the noise in the marketplace. And there's so much noise. We have so much competition doing so many activities that you have to be the person who the buyer says, oh, hey, I see you everywhere. Maybe I should be doing business with you. So what I always say to my clients, my coaching clients is, you know, how many hours a week is it going to take you to find these required leads? How many leads do you need in a week? You know, if you go back to the previous example, I think the number was, 24 a week. So 24 a week divided by 5, that's roughly 5 a day. If you had to find 5 leads a day, how long would that take you? Is that an hour? Is that 5 minutes? It could be that you go to a trade show or a breakfast and get 5 leads in that 1 hour. The next day, you make 5 phone calls. But the key is mixing up the media. This has 2 benefits to you. 1, you can find and attract more business to you when you're everywhere. 2, you can reach out more often to the leads you have when you're using multiple media. In the olden days, when we used to only have the telephone, you could only cold call the same person, a couple times a week before you became a stalker. But now we can cold call them once, we can send them an email. So we can send them 2 emails, make 2 phone calls in the same week. So now we're reaching out to them 4 times, which increases or speeds the velocity in which leads are moving through the pipeline. So being ubiquitous has multiple advantages. You need to decide, of course, what is the balance between what we call indirect and direct. Indirect are all the things that you put out there. It's sort of a one-to-many approach. It's, you might post a blog, or you might write an article in an association newsletter, or you might do some advertising or be on social media generally, versus direct, where you're actually sending a direct email, asking for a referral, doing some direct marketing to your specific target base. So you need to balance both of those because you're always needing to put new leads in the pipeline. Best sellers, of course, will block their calendar daily and weekly to make sure that they actually get this work done, because this is the leading indicator of success. You can't be successful and accelerate your sales if you're not measuring the leading indicators of success and then reviewing and adjusting on a weekly basis. The best sellers I know take a look at their numbers weekly and they make decisions. Am I ahead or behind based on where I need to be? And what do I need to do to course correct or leverage my success going into the next week? Being intimate with the numbers, as we say. So participation. Participation is the qualification, closing, and onboarding part of the sales process. And we accelerate velocity and improve closing ratios when we do 3 things very, very well. 1, we treat the buyer like a peer. We're not partners, we're peers. So what we do is we let them know that we are equal to them, they are equal to us. We also facilitate a buying decision. We don't sell. Buyers today don't want to be sold to. They are already engaged in the buying process when we reach out to them. And so we need to facilitate their buying process, and then we need to trust but verify. What I mean by that is it's really critical that you make sure from an objective standpoint that you have all the right information that you need in order to win the business. So let's talk about facilitating a buying decision. So 1, I talk about being a peer with the buyer. That's a mindset. You have to believe you have extraordinary value going into this meeting and the buyer should want to engage with you. If you don't believe that, then you need to make the first sale to yourself and discover what value you're bringing. Because if you go into the meeting feeling like you're bothering them, why would anyone buy from me, my product's not the best in the marketplace, then it's over before you start. Second thing we need to do is to look at becoming an insider to the client. I've written a lot on what I call insider selling because buyers today don't want partners. A partner presupposes you're an outsider. They actually want an insider to their organization. And we do this when we look at rapport differently. We know that we have to build personal rapport, which means, I know you and I like you. But that's not enough anymore. And in fact, personal rapport sometimes comes towards the end of the sale because the buyer has already engaged with your brand. Business rapport is like brand rapport. So think about it this way. A client is on your website, they're looking at advertising, they see sponsorships, maybe they talk to other people who are using your products, they see product demos. How do they feel about that brand before they engage? And for many buyers, when you make a call to them, if they see your company name and they don't already have that warm and fuzzy feeling about your brand, then they're likely not to pick up the phone. So you affect your brand or your business rapport by everything you do in the marketplace, your social media interactions, your participation in industry associations, your networking, and this includes both what you do as a seller to promote that brand, as well, of course, as what your marketing or branding teams do. And depending on the size of the company, whether you're a company of 1 or a company of tens of thousands, you may or may not be in control of all of that branding, but you can control the business rapport that is built in your territory. Lastly, we have corporate rapport. And corporate rapport is when they have, this is the true insider selling. There's multiple relationships. with your company and their company. So this is when they feel like you're a true insider. You have multiple relationships, so you're leveraging your existing buyer into multiple relationships, and you've got other people who are building multiple relationships inside their client. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the growth phase as well. So when we think about facilitating a buying process, here is what we're finding. And the research is really interesting on this. And I'll try to summarize some of it for you based on my experience as well. What we're finding is at the front end of this sales cycle here, 80% of that is controlled by the prospect. The reason why ubiquity is such an important approach is buyers are doing research on their own. It used to be when we were sellers that buyers didn't know who we were until we picked up the phone and said, hey, here we are. Now the reverse is true. We don't know who they are until they reach out to us. They choose to make themselves visible. So they're kind of hiding in the bushes, doing their research, sussing out the situation, trying to decide who they're going to invest their time with, because buyers are time stressed. So they're not going to take cold calls because if they don't know you, they don't want to waste their time. So they're going to do all that research in terms of prospecting and research to make sure that they are spending time with people that they want to do business with. When we come into this qualification and solution development, we see that the buyer's influence starts to level out in terms of equal, but they are doing a bunch of upfront qualification and solution development on their own before they engage with us. So they come into this conversation with some preconceived notions, which may be right or wrong. It's our job now in the qualification, not just to qualify them, in or out of our pipeline, but to qualify their assumptions on what they know about us to make sure that we level set if we need to, right? I'm sure everyone on this call has someone who has called you or reached out to your organization with a pre-set notion, pre-existing notion of something that you do or didn't do that wasn't right. So they're controlling still the first thoughts of your solution and your company. As we move into this presentation and close, you can see we've got 50-50 here. This is because buyers want to be engaged in the close. They do not want closing to happen to them. They want to be an equal partner in that decision. And so sellers who are still using hard-handed tactics, sort of arm twisting or tricks that we learned back in the 70s are closing less deals because they're not engaging with the buyer. More and more we are seeing that sellers who are using a sales process, an internal sales process, that forces the buyer into a specific step as we go are less likely to close business because buyers are fed up with that. They want to engage on their buying path, and it's critical for us to align all of these steps with their buying path and their buying speed. When you do that, you actually increase conversion rates and increase velocity because you're in sync. You're having a conversation instead of combating them and forcing them into your sales process. So I think about this less as a process and more of a methodology, because a methodology can be put on any single buying process. And I believe that the best sellers that we know these days are really focusing on facilitating a buying process as opposed to executing a sales process. It sounds like a small thing, it's little words, a word change, yet it changes the dynamic dramatically in the conversation. Oops. So let's talk about distrust but verify. I think that was actually Ronald Reagan who said that. It's a great sales quote as well, because we have to make sure we've got all information around how this buyer is going to buy before we make a presentation, or a proposal. I've been doing a lot of work with clients recently where we're studying their sales pipelines, And we noticed a couple of very interesting things. And I'm studying their sales pipelines, which are a conglomerate of over 300 of their resellers' pipelines. So we're looking at a lot of data. What we're finding is two really important things. One, when you analyze how long it takes for a seller to win a deal versus loss a deal, it's almost double the time. It takes us twice as long to lose a deal as it does to win a deal. The reasons for that are twofold, maybe threefold. One, from a mindset perspective, sellers don't trust their guts enough. They hang on to leads for far too long, even though they know that they're dead. You know, you've got a lead that you gave a proposal to, and now it's 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 5 months, and they haven't returned a call. Like, you know the lead is dead, but that competitive spirit inside says to you, oh, you know, I can chase this down, I can win it, I can make this person love me. But it's taking up bandwidth in your pipeline, in your mind, it's skewing your numbers, and it's taking you away from a client who really wants to do business with you. And I know many of you will say, oh, come on, Colleen, it only takes 5 minutes to leave a voicemail. Sure, but that is 5 minutes you could be spending actually talking to someone who wants to buy. So by improving the velocity of your pipeline, meaning getting rid of that gunk and sludge, you actually will create more opportunities for success. So that's one reason why we know it's taking longer for them to close lost. The other reason is we haven't done a proper qualification. We've rushed through the qualification and we've presented prematurely. What I'm finding is that in those deals that do close won versus close lost, is that we spend more time, if you look at the dates, more time in the qualification phase and less time in the proposal phase, versus the opposite. On deals that are lost, more time is spent in the proposal phase as opposed to the qualification phase. And it's led me to some interesting statistics. 75% of the work, if you took, let's say your sales cycle is 100 days, 75 days should be spent in the prospecting, qualifying, solution development, the upfront stuff before the proposal. If you do that, then you will win more pieces of business. We also know that 90% of deals are lost starting in that qualification because they move too quickly through. The right time to send a proposal is not when the client says, hey, what's your price? But yet, that's what a lot of salespeople do. So the qualification is really critical. What we also know is that we have to understand why people are going to buy. So what's the criteria, which is this question here on the list? What is the criteria for which they're going to make a decision and the priority of that criteria? So when someone says, when you're in a qualification, the two questions that get missed from sales perspective is, what is the criteria? How are you going to make a decision? Not who's involved, but what's important to you, you know, service, price, quality, all, you know, those kinds of things. And what's the most important criteria so that you can align your proposal with their criteria. And then what are they going to be doing with the proposal? So after you get a presentation, what happens next? When are they reviewing it? When's the latest they need to have this solution in play? You know, this is such a critical question missed by salespeople. Most salespeople ask, when do you want to make a decision? That's the wrong question to ask. We want to ask, when is the latest you want the textbooks in your school? When's the latest you want the oil on site? When's the latest you want the software installed? When's the latest you want the computers delivered? When do you want your teachers to start teaching our material? The reason is you can now accelerate the sale by teaching them how to buy. And this is a key differentiator, again, between those who are creating nonstop sales booms and those who are not. Your buyers don't know how to buy. What I mean by that is when they say yes, they don't know how long it's going to take between when they give you a PO and when they can have the product on site. And most of them have unrealistic expectations. So they think, well, in their minds, they're thinking, okay, I need to have this on site by July 15th. So as long as I give Colleen a PO by July 1st, we should be okay. Well, they don't know that we've got to go through credit checks and orders. They don't know if my manufacturer shuts down for 2 weeks at the beginning of July. They don't know that, my accounts payable department is 4 weeks behind in terms of, getting things set up for their suppliers. So what you need to do is to teach them this. When's the latest you need to have the computers on site? July 15th, they say. Okay, so it's going to take X number of days for us, to process your paperwork. And currently, we're facing a 6-week order time on those computers. So if we think, 6 weeks from July 15th puts us at June 1st. And I would suggest we give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room there, just because of holidays, in and around the July 1st, July 4th timeframe. So if we back that up to, just after the May long weekend, once we come back from the May long weekend, if we're able to finalize this proposal, we can then guarantee you'll have the computers on site by July 15th. How does that sound to you? What this does in the qualification phase is it tests their urgency. If they say, yep, sounds great to me, thank you for sharing that, then we know that they're serious about buying. If they balk and are willing to make a commitment to that buying time frame, to that project plan of buying, then that's a sign that they may not be as serious. So we really need to be testing this. What are you going to be doing with the proposals? Great question. How are you going to make a decision? I like these questions better than who's the decision maker. That's a really threatening question. And I think that sellers need to stop asking it. Phrase the question a different way. What happens to the proposal? How are you going to be making a decision? Who will be receiving the proposal? Who else needs to have eyes on this? It's way more inclusive, which helps whoever you're talking to feel like they want to introduce you to those other people, versus exclusive when you say who makes the decision. The person you're talking to, if it's not them, feels threatened and doesn't want to introduce you to those people at all. So slight changes in the way that we're going to ask the questions, and again, making sure that we're asking all of those questions. What's critical here is if you don't have all the questions, you need to make a U-turn and go back. I realize I'm missing some critical information. This actually will help you build a better proposal. You could also suggest to them that you get a draft proposal. So maybe you say to them, look, I think I've got everything settled for you. How about we meet to discuss a draft proposal or a preliminary proposal so that we can review it, make sure I didn't miss anything. I have a few additional questions for you. Can we meet one more time? I need to talk to Bob again. Do you want to be involved in that conversation, or should I go at it alone? These are all critical questions at helping build the right proposal. They send a signal to the customer that you are doing your due diligence, that you are concerned about making sure that this proposal meets their objectives and it's not just going to be a boilerplate. So let's talk about growth. So after we've closed business, we've got a client base, grow these customers, right? And growing customers is one of the most profitable things you can do in your business, because the more they buy from you and the more entrenched they are with you, the less likely they are to leave. The more engaged they are, the more people you have engaged, the more product, the more deployment, the less likely they are to leave. And the way I look at this in the new buying world is that everyone in the organization who touches the customer should be considered a profit center. It's not just the seller's responsibility to hang on to the business and grow it. It's everyone's responsibility. A client of mine in Ottawa, who is a national office furniture company, they couldn't figure out why, while they were making big sales, millions of dollars going into office build-outs for new furniture, they weren't getting any repeat orders. So when people needed to reorder chairs or desks, they were going to the competition. They could not figure that out. until we found that their installers, the guys who would go and install this equipment, were behaving rather badly on site. And not badly towards the customers, but badly towards the furniture. As they were putting it together, they were using, kind of rough construction language, let's say. They were complaining about the furniture. They were saying things, this is of course sanitized for the viewing audience. Oh, this crappy furniture never goes together well. Oh, we always have too many or too few parts. Why can't this stuff be square and level? Oh, this is taking way longer than it needs to. So of course, what happens? The client who's just spent $1 million is mortified. What they're thinking, what, did I just buy some terrible furniture? Did I make a horrible decision? The last taste in their mouth is one of distaste, and they have buyer's remorse. So what do? They go to someone else to buy the add-on. So we had to train this installer team to be client-friendly, to be a profit center. Once that behavior changed, growth happened because now the repeat orders were coming in. So that's an example of everyone's a profit center. A large aerospace manufacturing company of my client of mine in the US, they had a similar problem. Clients were really ticked off at them and starting to order parts from other companies because they were late on so many deliveries. And we couldn't figure out why they were late until we discovered that the person running the loading dock was on vacation and no one was there for a backup. So stuff was piling up on the loading dock, not getting onto the trucks. Easy to prevent if you think of yourself as a profit center. Another manufacturing client of mine in Mexico was the same thing. Sales seemed to be coming in, customers seemed to be happy, but the operations department who was ordering the raw materials to make the product wasn't staying on top of inbound orders, so production was behind. So shipments got behind, so customers got frustrated and placed reorders with the competition. So what does this look like practically? Well, if we think about it, the old-fashioned way for a seller was to build, a 3x3 matrix. I'm sure you have been through this before. If you've been through any of the CPSA courses on selling or account management, we talk about building your org chart or your 3x3, 3 wide, 3 deep programs. But that's still important for the seller to do, but we can't take all the relationships inside the organization. If we are one person managing all the relationships, then we're missing opportunities and we become the pinch point. So the seller still may manage that relationship with the buyers, the purchasing managers, the power users. You might have, executive support, managerial support. Maybe, if you sell to the marketing department, you've got the CEO, the VP of marketing, and the Marcom. Maybe you also have a relationship with the sales team who's using your product as well. So you've got the VP of sales, the regional sales director, and the sellers. And that's great. But the smartest companies now are also having other people build out these 3x3 matrices. So the installers might have relationships with the warehouse manager, the shipping and receiving people, and the technicians. One of my natural resources clients has their drivers do this. So the driver always has, of course, the yard manager as their contact, but now we want them to have the warehouse manager, the guy in charge of shipping and receiving, maybe a quality control guy as well. So they're building out these matrices. And then we might have someone else inside the company, an order desk or inside sales, who's also building out a 3x3 matrix. So now what's happening is you've got multiple people inside your organization managing multiple people inside their organization, which allows you to grow the business more effectively. It's not, again, just about quality of relationships, it's about quantity of relationships. And the first step to growing an account, selling more to an existing customer, is to build out these matrices so that you've got multiple contacts of them with multiple contacts of yours. That way, you not only grow the account, but you protect the account. So, a large client of mine, Fortune 10, I think they are maybe, natural resources company, they lost a huge client of theirs because their field sales rep was really the only point of contact, and he retired. He did an amazing job with this customer for years. He retired, and his boss put another person in charge of the account, which was fine, and that person was a good person, but his boss didn't have any relationship with this client, so he put the wrong personality in, which just didn't mesh with the customer. There was no inside sales contact with this customer. There was no operations support with this customer. So they felt like they got moved to this new person who was a stranger. They had no other relationships inside the account. So they thought, well, we don't really like Colleen. This isn't working very well for us, so now's a good time to put it out to bid. They hadn't put it out to bid for years. So we don't want that to happen, which is why it's critical that you build out these relationships, because it protects the client as well as helps you grow the client. You want to build this internal customer community. So who in your department could actually be working with customers, helping them to manage their metrics and their KPIs, building relationships, so that you're actually becoming an insider to the business. The aerospace company that I talked to you about, they went through a massive project of transformation. And one of the things that they did is they had a war room meeting every day with all of these people who had to report out on metrics. And the metrics were all tied to the customer's metrics. So rather than saying we want, you know, a 24-hour turnaround on quotes, they went to the customers and said, what's your expectation for how fast we get you quotes? And that became the metric. Rather than saying we want to have all products shipped out 2 weeks from an order, they went to the client and they said, what does on-time delivery mean to you? And that became their metric. And when they did that, they were aligned with their customers. They were able to show improvement to their customers. They were able to show alignment with their customers. And their business review meetings were able to show you told us you expected, you know, a 1-week delivery. You know, we started the year at 2 weeks. We're now down to 10 days, and we're moving closer and closer to your metric. That creates a customer for life. So we get rapid acceleration when we are working with all of the departments who affect the customer success and creating what I like to call, you know, a customer success organization. So let's lastly, in our last 10 minutes, talk about leverage. So leverage is all about leveraging your sales team and leveraging your customers so that you can attract more business. And I'm not going to talk here about testimonial referrals, because it's what everyone talks about. You guys know, you're all advanced sellers. You know to be asking for referrals and getting testimonials. I'd like to talk about leveraging your sales team from a coaching perspective and talk about why preventative coaching, using your best to mentor your rest, and an expectation of 100 at 100 is the right way to go for really rapid acceleration. First thing, as an organization, you need to be creating the pathway to success, as we talked about, and aligning compensation with growth. I coached a team this week, across Canada organization, discovered that they were totally out of sync. The company's goals were set to start September 1st, and the sellers' goals were set to start January 1st. So the sellers and the corporate were always out of sync in terms of where they were year to date. Doesn't work, creates dysfunction. It creates dysfunction. Compensation plans, of course, need to be aligned to make sure that you're accelerating success and that your goals as a manager and the seller's goals are actually in alignment. Then we need to be managing metrics. Coaching, preventative coaching, only is effective when you're managing from an objective standpoint as opposed to a subjective standpoint. So we want to be measuring our personal pipelines, our volumes, our conversion ratios, the opportunities created by month. And these are metrics you can be measuring as a sales rep, even if you don't have a manager, or even if your manager is unwilling to coach you. Because your mantra needs to be, it doesn't matter that I know I'm good. It matters that I know why I'm good. Why you're good is leverageable. When you know why you're good, you can repeat it. If you are operating in an unconscious state, no matter how successful you are always having success by accident. And as a sales manager, this is critical, because if you know why your best salespeople are good, then you can replicate that on with other sales reps. You can use it for onboarding. You can use it to help coach your B reps into A players. We also want, of course, to be managing our conversion metrics. So the first metrics were all on opportunity creation. These are all on opportunity closing, the fun part of our business. What is our average close rate? What's in our night forecast? How many past due close dates do we have? Our win versus loss speed, our total lifetime of the client, our close rates, new versus existing customers. You know, most people just assume that their win rates on existing customers are better, but have you actually measured it? If it's not better, then you might have a customer defection problem or a customer satisfaction problem. And then, of course, your annual, what did you expect to come in versus what actually came in? Because we see a lot of cases where the client says, yep, we're going to, you know, we want to buy $1 million, but they only end up buying $500,000. So are you actually getting the number of orders that you thought you were going to get? When we do this, we can measure our sales velocity. I love this sales velocity calculation. A client of mine actually built it right into their sales dashboard. They use a very sophisticated business intelligence tool that's bolted onto they're using Microsoft Dynamics, I believe, as their dashboard. And they calculate their sales velocity, which is simply opportunities multiplied by deal value, multiplied by win rate, divided by the number of days in the pipeline. And what I love about this is it just gives you a baseline number. Okay, 3,000 doesn't mean anything. It's just a baseline. But you can affect dramatically your sales velocity, which is your sales productivity or sales efficiency, by just improving metrics by 10%. If we can bump our value by 10%, grow it from 10 to 11,000, improve our win rate just from 30 to 33%, improve our velocity by 90 days, even with the same number of opportunities, we're becoming a much more productive sales rep. And creating a nonstop sales boom requires you to be productive, right? It's not about working more hours, it's about working differently in the hours you have so that you can be more productive. This is a 34% productivity improvement with no change to the number of opportunities in your pipeline. I mean, you're improving 10% in each of those values, and you're getting a 34% improvement in velocity. It's not a lot of places in the world you can get a 3 times a retestment there, right? So the last thing you need to do as we're wrapping up today is think to yourself, where do you fit right now? Right? Be honest with yourself. Where do you fit in each of these 4 categories? And what do you need to do? What are the 3 things that you learned today that you need to do to get into this organizational acceleration? So, you know, if you're constantly behind and you have not enough leads, but your closing rate is high, where are you going to get enough leads so that you're here? If your closing rates are terrible, but you've got huge amounts of leads, what can you do to close those floodgates? And get it up into the atmosphere. And of course, if you are both, and be honest with yourself, not enough leads, not a great closing ratio, what do you need to do first? Do you need to improve your closing ratio, or do you need to improve your lead generation ratio, or can you do both at the same time? But your job is to assess your own or your team's willingness and ability to achieve this organizational acceleration so that you can then make those improvements. So I'm ready to take questions. If we want to see if there are any questions, and as we do that, okay, awesome. Let's hear what your questions are.
Questions in the Q&A section. Colleen, can you see those? Would you like me to read them out?
Yeah, why don't you read them so that, well, I'm getting organized. There we go. I can read it all.
Let me just pull them up here. Okay. So I believe the first question is with relation to creating a growth path. We have the question, how would this work in the insolvency and restructuring business where clients are not one's normal cup of tea? In other words, consumer debtors come in when they have encountered debt problems.
Yeah. Okay, so how would creating a path, sorry, and did the first part of the question say how to create a pipeline?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So in this case, I mean, you're not going to be making any cold calling or doing much direct work at all, because you can't call people and say, hey, you have too much consumer debt. People aren't going to want to admit that to you. So you need to do a ton of thought leadership so that people know you as the right company to come to. You guys know your industry better than I do. I suspect, having talked to a few people in this industry, that a lot of people who come to you are embarrassed. They might be scared. So they need to feel safe. So I would be writing a ton and putting it in all sorts of broad publications that consumers might read, newspapers, websites, talking about safe ways to restructure your debt, why it's important to restructure your debt, how to restructure your debt without going into bankruptcy, how to recover from bankruptcy if you're in, top 10 things you need to know before you declare bankruptcy. If you put yourself out there as a real thought leader, then people will come to you who are serious about needing to do business. I would also look to align myself with some of the accounting firms in town who might be doing business with small businesses who might need debt financing, debt restructuring, or who are more likely to go into bankruptcy. Of course, people who may be going into personal bankruptcy might not be using accounting firms, but if they're small business owners, they might be, or if they, have fairly substantial holdings, they might be. So you might also consider talking to some accounting firms to see if there's some thought leadership work you can do so that they can refer you to that business. But everything that you do needs to position yourself as the place to go where people can get good, honest advice in a safe environment that they're not going to feel embarrassed about. It's going to be, treated as a bad person or a criminal, and get the pipeline flowing internally to you.
That's a great response. Got the next one here. Do you see the need for 12 attempts to convert a lead to an opportunity? That seems high.
Well, it's going to vary by industry. 7 to 12 is kind of average. In highly competitive marketplaces, it's taking 12 to 15. I was working with a textbook company. They sell dictionaries and English programs to elementary schools, and they are taking like 20 calls into the teacher before the teacher would return their call. And I've got other clients who, it takes 2 or 3. So you should know your metrics. I use 12 in workshops like this just to give you what the average is. I think if you request the calculator from me, and here's my contact information for you, I've used 7 in the calculator as opposed to 12, which I use today. So.
Perfect. Another comment here. Any comments on when there is radio silence from client on deal progress?
Oh, don't you love the radio silence? It's so frustrating. So a couple of things. One, you're more frustrated with radio silence when you don't have a full pipeline. So it's really critical to make sure you've always got someone in the pipeline who's, willing to engage, so you don't get overly frustrated and do something stupid, i.e. stalking with that person who's gone radio silent. 2, make sure you're using multiple media. So make sure you're using email, make sure you're using the phone, try to maybe send them something in the mail, stop by and see them. Also, make sure you're dealing with multiple people inside the organization. If I call, if Jim is my main contact, but Jim's not getting back to me, and I also have Sarah, I can call Sarah and say, hey, what's going on? I haven't heard from Jim. So that's also critical. There's a lot you can do to try to prevent this up front by walking the buyer through that buying process that we talked about. So if you've got a date, like, if we said you have to have a decision by June 15th, is that okay? And they say yes. Now, as June 15th approaches or passes, we can use slightly more assertive language, like, hey, Jim, I know that you wanted to have this in place by July 15th. Our go-no-go date of June 15th has passed. Has anything changed? Ultimately, you have to make the decision based on what you know about your business to hang on or to let it go. I I think most salespeople don't trust their gut enough. We hang on to leads far too long, and it clogs up our pipeline. And so if you've got deals in your pipeline that are stale, you know, they've just gone silent, I would give them 1 or 2 last attempts, and, you know, with an email or a voicemail that says, hey, Jim, it's Colleen. I haven't heard from you in a few months. I'm guessing you've made another decision, or I'm guessing you've made other plans. That's fine. If you could just let me know yes or no, I'll, you know, I promise not to pester you anymore. That kind of like taking away the deal. And then if they don't call you back, then I would wipe them out. Move on to someone who does love you.
That's great. And then if you could expand on what an example of an attempt is.
Oh, attempt is an attempt to reach someone. So a voicemail is you know, calling someone on the phone, talking to them, or leaving a voicemail. An email could be an attempt. A LinkedIn email could be an attempt. You know, depending on your business, I have some clients in particularly traditional businesses where they actually physically knock on doors. They're on a route, so they stop in and see someone. That could be an attempt as well.
Perfect. And then I think that's it for our questions in terms of time, Colleen, there. If you guys have any additional questions, you'll be able to see Colleen's website address there, engageselling.com for Engage Selling Solutions. Also, this webinar will be available to you via recording and will be sent out shortly. So, of course, on behalf of the CPSA, we want to thank our host, Colleen Francis. Thank you so much, as well as our audience for attending today's webinar. Please, should you have any questions, please contact salessuccess@cpsa.com. And for those of you, as mentioned, who would like a video copy of this webinar, stay tuned. This will be emailed shortly. Thanks so much, everyone, today. Colleen, thank you so much for your time and this wonderful webinar. We appreciate it so much.
Hey, my pleasure. It was really great to work with you guys. And you know what? If there's anyone on the call who's in Ottawa, I'm going to be at a live CPSA event. What did we, May 17th, right?
May 17th.
So I would love the chance to meet you. Yeah,
yes,
if you're in Ottawa or coming to Ottawa, come and join us for breakfast. It's early morning, but it will be delicious. And we will have copies of Nonstop Sales Boom for everyone who's there. If you don't have a copy, I can get you one. And if you do have a copy, bring yours, and I'm happy to sign it.
That's perfect. And if you'd like to attend that event, that is www.cpsa.com/events, and you'll be able to see the registration link for May 17th with Colleen there. Thank you so much, everyone. Colleen, thanks again.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
You too.